Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure. Watch me as I Rocketeer.
All right, Fight Talk Down Under, episode 4. We're back for another big week. I'm of course Dan Meehan from Fight News Australia, and my co-host is our featherweight superstar, Lockjaw Justin Van Heerden. How are you, mate?
Yeah, doing good. I mean, we're up to the 4th episode now. We've come this far, so it's the success story that is Fight Talk Down Under is continuing. It is continuing. It's getting better. So yeah, I'm excited to when we get to that point where we're like, hey guys, welcome to episode 40, and then like eventually, welcome to episode 400 if we're still alive by then, if Russia hasn't invaded the world and taken over control of everything.
Well, there's certainly no guarantees on that front at the moment. It's looking pretty ominous over there, but we'll keep going as long as we can. And it's been a good start so far. It's been fun anyway, and hopefully everyone listening has enjoyed it. Now, you've had, obviously we touched on last week, you've had some visitors up at Freestyle Fighting Gym there from City Kickboxing. So how's the week been?
Oh man, they are the worst people I've ever met in my life. Just terrible. Not a single nice thing to say about them. I mean, that's obviously not true. They're like probably some of the coolest people I've had the privilege of meeting through this sport. We've had obviously a couple of the guys from City Kickboxing in. It's been awesome. The boys have just been stuck in, jumping into like all the sessions, training every day. Obviously, Volk's in camp now, preparing for zombies. So the boys have just been, jumping in, getting amongst it, and kind of mixing it up with everyone that's on the mats, regardless of, what their sort of level is or what they're sort of doing there. The guys have been, nothing but accepting of that sort of front of things, where they would jump in and do work with anyone, which is always cool to see. And you can kind of tell that it makes a difference, man, for some of these people that are like only like fresh into sort of being in an environment like this, to have someone that's like at that level and is, as experienced in fighting in the UFC, to take the time and just come over and, go out of their way to make your day a bit better. It's always cool to see. And that's kind of the vibe that's just been there the whole time the boys have been there. Obviously Jamie had his last sort of hard hit out on Friday, just gone. He's obviously, heading out to fight Jalen Turner. So it was cool. The boys were there to help him with his last sort of hard hit out and sort of couple sessions, and give him that extra push. So that the energy was quite strong in the room on those days, as it is every day. But especially when it's someone's last couple of sessions before it's time for them to go do their thing, it's always that extra level, that kind of the energy's good, the banter's good. So it's been awesome, man. Like everyone that's here from City Kickboxing, like Blood Diamond, Carlos Ulberg, Eugene Behrman, all the guys that are just sort of here, they're kind of just stand up guys, just doing their thing, and they just love martial arts, love a bit of banter. It's been awesome watching the banter play out between Eugene and Joe in the gym. So there's always something for each one of them to sort of pick up with each other, and it's just been pretty funny. So and I think for those boys, it's been funny for them to sort of see how Joe generally is in the gym day in, day out. And he's always good for a laugh and some entertainment. But it's been wicked. I have nothing but good things to say about all the boys that I've sort of shared the mats with. I sort of got to pinch myself every now and then. I was sort of even saying to some friends today, I still got to pinch myself a bit, man. Like I kind of, you're just getting to deal with some of the greatest minds in mixed martial arts and some of the pioneers of the sport. And then, people that have been around the game for ages now. So super privileged. And it's been wicked to have the guys there.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that actually. It's kind of like a dream sort of scenario there, with like two of the strongest gyms in the region really just joining forces, and to be in the middle of that, you must be like a kid in a candy store there, just with all these incredible fighters and incredible trainers just there, at your disposal. It's good, and it's like, just being around them from that capacity of things, where you're sort of thinking about who they are within the sport, and like you said, within the region,
but just sort of just actually getting to kind of hang out and sort of bounce just general conversation and kind of everyday sort of things off people. It's kind of, you know, there's that avenue as well, because I think it's cool for like people to sort of see these guys in it, or it's for any athlete or any sport, to see them on TV and kind of have this sort of thing, and to then like go, oh, okay, well, yeah, this person's obviously an elite athlete, and you know, you form this perception of them, but at the end of the day, we sort of remember that like they're normal guys, they're normal people. Like they have their own sort of thoughts and processes and personalities and banter and stuff like that. And that's been the coolest thing for me, is just sort of, you know, kind of just getting to bounce around with the guys and catch their sort of different ideas and thoughts and processes and conversations, and just kind of just, yeah, have a chat, have a laugh, and just sort of a general sort of good banter in between the sort of hard work that we're doing on the mats. Which like even so, like for example, like I had a conversation with Carlos where I kind of said to him, I was like, man, I got to be honest with you, like when I did like the breakdown before your fight on the card where you and Izzy in that fought, man, like I for sure was like, man, I don't know about this dude, like I don't know if he's like doing this because it just kind of works out now, or it's kind of a thing. But after hanging out with him for a couple of days, training with him, getting to actually talk to the guy and stuff like that, man, you can tell that he's actually like 100% invested into this sort of thing, and wants to be in that world championship sort of conversation and caliber and stuff like that. And super nice guy, super humble. Yeah, so that's been cool for me. And that's another thing that you can sort of take away from it, man. When you get the opportunity to rub shoulders with people like this, you can kind of really appreciate the work that they're doing in the sport, and when they go out there and put their performances on. But at the same time, you can actually go, you know, you can reel it in and reflect on yourself and go, you know, maybe I was wrong about my sort of perception with this person, which, like I said, I feel super privileged now that I've gotten to sort of bounce around with him these last few days and kind of, yeah, just get to know him and all the other boys as well. Yeah, it's been awesome. And like just seeing the work that gets done, you know, some of the rounds I've gotten to see, like the other day when we had sparring, kind of just watching Carlos and Tyson Pedro move around and do rounds of the work that they're doing. And you sort of seeing these guys and the pace that's being set and you know, the level that it's sort of at. And then, you know, getting to move around with like I said, with like someone like Blood Diamond, man, who's, you just kind of like, it makes no sense to your brain how he's able to hit you from certain positions and the certain stuff that he's able to do. Like you think you're circling out of range, and next thing there's a foot just smacking you in the face, and you're like, man, I thought it was good. Like I thought it was good here. I thought it was safe. Like, how are you hitting me right now? And then obviously, you know, having someone like Eugene in the gym, who's, like you sort of touched on, you know, a brilliant mind within the sport, and watching him and Joe kind of dissect things and be aware of the rounds that are happening. Like obviously there's multiple people sparring at once, but they're aware of everything that's happening. So they're constantly like, and then afterwards they're pulling people aside going, here's what we can do. Here's what we need to change. This was really good. And you're like, how are you able to comprehend all this when all of this is happening at once? And I'm sitting there trying to focus on one round, and then I'm like missing out on something else that's happening here, but they just see everything. They read everything. They analyze everything. And that's awesome. That shows you how invested they are into the sport and then into the individuals that are on the mat at any given time.
It's kind of an eye-opening thing when you meet someone in person, isn't it? Like, or even on Zoom or whatever. But you meet someone one-on-one. You know, we form these perceptions, like you sort of said there. We form these perceptions of people that we watch on TV, right? Just based on their attitudes when they've got cameras in their faces, and you know, when they're in the ring in their underwear in front of thousands of people, you know, punching on. But then when you actually meet them in person and realize that that they're just a normal person, it's kind of just flips it all on its head. Like even in doing what I do, I've met lots of people that I would never thought that I would ever share a conversation with, and it's the same thing. You're just like, oh, they're just like you and I. They're just people trying to make a living, and you know, part of that just involves just being on television and fighting and all that sort of stuff. So it's it's definitely an interesting thing. It's interesting that you brought up Carlos there. I actually wondered whether, you know, he might have, because, you know, things get back to people when you say things on podcasts. Not that you said anything really bad, but you know, I thought it would have been an interesting little dynamic there if he had have actually heard some of those things. But sounds like he's a pretty down to earth sort of character anyway, and would have sort of shrugged it all off. But Is there
Yeah.
anyone that from that team that really just sort of stands out to you? Do you look at someone on the mats there and just think, wow, this guy is legit?
Eugene.
Eugene?
Yep. Obviously he's obviously an incredible coach, but with that comes a wealth of knowledge in the sport and an understanding of the game in such a deep capacity. But the coolest thing that's been sticking out for me is watching Eugene jump in on all the sessions. Like he's just jumps in, does trains like everyone else, just gets stuck in. And I thought that was, that's been really cool to sort of see. And just kind of watching him go through the motions and just do it. Obviously he's an incredible coach, and he's developing these world-class fighters same way as Joe. But whenever you see them actually jumping in, having a role, moving around, getting stuck in these sessions, and you get this little sort of thing, like perception, where you go, oh no, like these guys are well capable of practicing what they're preaching to you on the daily, and they understand it at such a high level. Like, I hate rolling Joe. I just hate moving around with him and rolling with him. I feel like it's like it's like you have a cement bag with arms and legs on you, and you just can't do anything. And you're like, this isn't like, I should be able to move. I should be able to do stuff. And then if he's like holding pads for you, or he's breaking down some striking techniques and stuff like that, and when he starts physically showing you the sort of movements and the stuff, and you're like, I have no idea really. At the end of the day, you're kind of like, the more you learn, you just realize I have no idea. And the understanding of where they're at, and the level of knowledge that they actually have and practice that they've put in over the years, you're kind of just like, man, I have a long way to go. And it's the same with Eugene. So like, that's been something that stuck out for me. But as far as like an athlete, where I'm kind of like looking at them just going like, you don't make sense to my brain, that like the stuff that you can do. Bloods is probably one of those people that sticks out. Like I sort of said, it's the way I was unfortunate with how his debut went, but I think he's going to be able to rally up, bounce back, and kind of showcase his skills in his next performance. But that guy, man, the stuff that he can do with his body, his understanding of distance, his ability, his striking ability, his understanding of MMA as a whole is actually a lot deeper than he would have got to show in his debut and what people might think based on the experience level that he has in mixed martial arts. But you can tell the guy's, he's very knowledgeable within the sport, and obviously he's super talented. He's a freak.
It's interesting that you brought up Eugene there. Like, I guess youth and athleticism can get you so far in this sport, but really knowledge is key at the end of the day, isn't it? They just, they accumulate all that knowledge and all that experience, and still I don't know how old Joe and Eugene are, but, they can still, take it to a young buck like yourself pretty easily on the mats there. But I think Eugene had a pretty extensive fight career, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I know. I think from memory,
from kickboxing, right?
Yeah, from definitely in the kickboxing capacity. And that's like, I mean, that's sort of the thing about it, man. Like I've seen countless videos over the years, whether it's in a boxing format, mixed martial arts, wrestling, whatever the capacity is, jiu-jitsu. You see some of these older guys, and then you see them moving around with some of these young up-and-coming people, and you're just watching them just like absolutely just pick people apart or just ragdoll them around, and you're like, what is happening here? But it's not just, it's the experience, but it's the understanding of how they maneuver their body, how you respond to some of the stuff they're doing, the little subtle intricacies that you see when they are kind of doing things and they're setting something up, and they're like, for example, from the jiu-jitsu side of things, you roll someone that's like experienced, that's been around the game for ages, and someone like, for example, like someone like Joe, you are going through plan B, C, and D in your head of how you're trying to improve your position or do something. He's already at F, and he's waiting for you to get there. And once you get there, he's already 4 steps ahead of that. So you're kind of like, what is happening right now? And I guess as you go through sort of your own kind of experience and you build up from there, you can kind of see that for yourself. But when it's happening to you at such a level where you're sitting there going, this isn't right. Like I'm not like, it's not like it's my first day on the mats. Like I should be able to, for example, I should be able to improve my position. I should be able to land a punch. Like, what is happening? Why am I not able to do things? But then you realize it goes so much deeper, and that the more you think you actually know you actually don't, and there's so much more that you can absorb in. So, and that's when it comes back to sort of just being, mature enough to sort of still go, man, I've got so much more that I still got to learn in this game. I'm so young into it, and look who I'm surrounded by on the daily. I'd be an idiot not to just sort of shut my mouth and absorb it and kind of soak it all in. And I see it sometimes with some of these other people, man. They get around some experienced people and they're just missing the picture in front of them. They're focused on something else like entirely, and they're just missing out on the opportunity that's right there. Like, for example, one of the days sort of last week, I was just watching one of our amateurs who he pulled like Bloods aside, and I was asking him about, certain ways that he was setting up like a certain kick and a certain sort of clinch where he was disengaging and landing sort of like a head kick. And, I think Blood's probably spent like half an hour, 45 minutes with him, just showing him, breaking it down and kind of explaining it to him. And that's what you want to see from both ends. You want to see someone with the experience and the knowledge more than happy to sort of pass it on and kind of go, here's how you do this, but also the sort of maturity of someone who's coming up in the sport to kind of go, hey, here's someone that knows a lot. Let me kind of pick their brain a bit and soak it all in, instead of doing the detrimental thing and kind of just going, nah, like I'm good. I kind of know what I'm doing. I have my own sort of thing, and I'll just kind of go through the motions.
It's a difficult thing for a male to do in a lot of ways. I don't know if that amateur was actually a male, but for us guys, it's hard for us to put our egos aside and just sort of be humbled on the mats and sort of absorb those lessons. So that's that's an impressive effort from that amateur there. But as you sort of touched on earlier there, in camp you've got Jamie Mullarkey. I think he's sort of part-time. Is he with Ross Pearson still, or is he at Freestyle full-time now?
So he sort of splits between Freestyle and Central Coast MMA, where he's still under Ross. So, I believe him and Ross flew out this morning to go to America. So, so he's kind of split between the two. And obviously this would be, I believe he'll fight, and then I'm not quite sure, but I'd imagine he'd come straight back and then to help sort of finish off Volk's kind of camp. So yeah, it's basically, the way it's sort of panned out now, it's basically like, we've kind of all, like those boys from Central Coast and some of the boys from Sydney and that have always kind of like, it's always kind of like joined together. So even though there's the separate entities, it's all kind of like joined together and forming this kind of oceanic alliance, I guess you could call it. And everyone's kind of just getting stuck in and doing the work. Like obviously we had the City Kickboxing boys here. Obviously, we have Jamie Mullarkey doing his camp. We have Blake Donnelly coming up and splitting between being in Canberra and coming up to Freestyle. We had Tyson Pedro in. Obviously, we had Aline Blanco in, and like we've had all these people that are kind of like coming in, sharing the mat together, and you can kind of just see the level of work that's being done and that continues to be done. It's just going to keep increasing, and that's just a given. So, look at someone like Jamie. He's going against Jalen Turner in this upcoming fight with all the potential to go out there and get another 50K bonus and get another stunning knockout. And that comes back to the work that we're doing and having the ability to share the mats with all these highly talented individuals. Like you pretty much if you walked into freestyle, at any given moment, and obviously there's going to be like world-class people on the mats, but especially at the moment with the boys from City Kickboxing being here, with people, all these other top Australian fighters being there, we literally have some of the most talented individuals in the oceanic region all in one room doing work together. The results that you're going to get of improvement out of that are always just going to be immense.
Yeah, and that name you came up with there, the Oceanic Alliance, is pretty awesome. Actually, I reckon you should trademark that if that hasn't already been taken. There, it's sort of sounds like a little like a new wrestling stable in the UFC. There, the Oceanic Alliance. The new NWO. There, if you ever watched wrestling,
100%.
That was a cool one. That stuck in my mind anyway. But
I might actually trademark that.
Yeah, I think you should because obviously out of our 7 listeners, someone's probably going to go and do it. So I may as well beat them to it. But no jokes. We do have more than 7. We've got at least 9.
At least, especially it's episode 4. So I think we're going to crack the double digits.
Yeah, yeah. No, so we love our listeners. We do have a decent audience building there. So it's been good on that front. But back to Jamie Mullarkey anyway.
Yep.
I guess, like you touched on there, he's coming up against Jalen Turner, who's another finisher. He's 11-4, 4-2 in the UFC. I think he's got all finishes. I think out of his 11 wins,
Yeah.
he's got 8 KOs and 3 submissions, which is pretty incredible stat, really. And obviously Mullarkey's is a finisher as well. The UFC seems to like to throw him these challenges, right? Like he's had Devontae Smith and Karma Worthy, who are both sort of big sort of physical guys, finishers, dangerous finishers. So Jalen Turner's probably a bit of a similar proposition in that front. So, and obviously Mullarkey's he's got 2 on the bounce now, so he's pretty well equipped for those sorts of challenges. So how do you see the matchup playing out?
Yeah, so I mean, you're kind of not wrong there, man. They seem to want to, when it comes to being like some of these fighters from the Oceanic region, they're throwing them like to the walls, man. There's no feeder fights here like you get for some of these other fighters, and just like I said, like I'll call it like I see it. They definitely the matchmakers have no sympathy for fighters from the Oceanic region. If you look at some of these matchups that are getting thrown their way, but yeah, Jamie's just been going strength to strength. Obviously, you look at his last 2 performances, and especially that last fight with Devontae in the first round. There were a couple of times too where Devontae was able to get some good shots off and do some good work. But at the end of the day, the maturity that you're seeing in Jamie in these performances, where he's adjusting in these little moments, he's winning these little battles, and then able to sort of pull himself together and go, okay, let's go back to what works for us. Here, let's reset to the game plan that we had, and let's go out and kind of do the work that we're capable of doing. And I think that's what you're going to see against Jalen Turner again. Obviously, Jalen's a very talented fighter in his own right. He's a big guy for the weight division. He's very tall, very long. And like you sort of said, he comes out to finish fights. Jamie comes out to finish fights. So the fight's got all the potential to be an absolute barn burner. It's got that fight of the night potential written all over it. I think it can very, very much so be a 3-round kind of fight where these guys are just trying to put each other away, and we just kind of go back and forth, a la Jamie's debut against Brad Riddell. He obviously showed what kind of heart and determination he has to be able to just keep coming. But man, I'm going to just say that I see Jamie absolutely melting Jalen Turner in this fight. I feel like he's going to just be able to use all the tools that he has, his head movement, his kicks, his punches, his ability to wrestle, all that sort of stuff's going to come together, and he's going to just put a pace on. And kind of similar to how the fight went with Devontae, I feel like at some point Jamie's just going to just start, putting a pace on that's going to make Jalen sort of crumble and kind of, lead him to an exit. And it's going to be up to him which exit he decides to take, whether that's going to be crumbling and trying to just hoping that he gets taken down and pounded out, or whether he's going to get submitted, or whether he's just going to get knocked clean out on the feet. But looking at the fight, man, obviously Jalen's not a slouch. He's an absolute monster, but I think Jamie Mullarkey is going to melt him, and I'm going to say it's going to be a first round finish, but definitely this fight's not going the distance, like, at all.
It certainly looks that way on paper. It doesn't really look like a decision sort of fight. But Jalen Turner's been a bit of a boogeyman for Australian fighters in the UFC. Just looking down his record, he's knocked out Callan Potter here in Melbourne. I was in the building for that one inside a minute, and he's also beaten Josh Kulabau a couple of years ago. So it'd be nice if Jamie could sort of break the hoodoo there.
Yeah, here's the thing about with those fights, right? No knock on Callan Potter or anything like that, but it just seemed like in that fight, Callan sort of came out and looked like a bit of sort of a deer in headlights, just looked frozen. And obviously, Jalen came out ready to murder someone and was able to put him away. The Kulabau fight, that's an interesting one, because obviously it was a lightweight. It was at a short notice that Josh took that fight to make his debut. And, as we know, Josh blew out his knee in that fight as well, but was still able to land some heavy shots and do some good work despite all the sort of motions of things that came together for that fight. Obviously not taking anything away from Jalen. He won both those fights. He went out there and performed, did his job like he had to. But this is a whole different ballgame when we're talking about a young, hungry guy from the Central Coast who loves to fight, who's who who everyone knows as the hooligan, and that's the vibe and the energy that he has when he comes in there. Like, the guy's an absolute savage, and he has that energy all through, through these training sessions that we're doing, through the sparring sessions that we're doing. Like, he and I were actually having a conversation about this, where you can kind of tell, like we were saying to each other, like, you can kind of tell when you're in camp, you're like you're a bit more, the staunchness comes out more, the need to kind of be competitive comes out more. So, watching Jamie do his last few sessions before flying out, and kind of being part of that, and seeing him kind of put the work in, obviously I'm going to be biased, he's my teammate, but man, he's like, the guy's a savage, and I just don't think that someone like Jalen is going to cope well with a guy that isn't intimidated by his, size, his ability, and his own sort of finishing ability that he has. I feel like if it gets ugly, the fight gets dirty and starts becoming a bit of a scrap, I feel like he's going to have a bit of an adjustment that he's going to have to make when he realizes Jamie's right in front of him, and he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, Callan Potter was a short notice replacement as well when he fought Jalen Turner. So there was, there's probably a little bit of a backstory there that maybe tells us all we need to know about that one. But I guess Mullarkey, as you say, is a level up. He's a guy who's not short on cardio, and he's not short on sort of confidence and the ability to put a pace on. And as you sort of touched on there, it sounds like he's that's reflected in his work in the gym as well.
Yeah, well, all I'm going to say is I'm stoked that he's on a plane flying to America right now, and he's not going to be kicking me in the legs or punching me in the face anytime soon. It's good for me. So it's one less sort of beating I have to take in the gym at the moment.
Absolutely. And Mullarkey, he's only 27 years old. You sort of forget, like, I think he's 14-4 now, 2-2 in the UFC. Feels like he's been around even on the local scene for quite some time, but he's only 27, and sort of like you touched on there as well, he's getting better with every fight. So it's been impressive to see. But he's unranked at the moment, I think. If he's successful against Jalen Turner, that'd be 3 wins on the bounce. Hopefully, you would think it would be looking at a ranked opponent at that point. But what's his potential? Like, do you see him being able to sort of push into the rankings and be a title contender in time?
Yeah, and I feel like if you look at Australian MMA at the moment, and the sort of talent pool within the region, someone like Jamie is a perfect example of how much the sport's evolved in the last few years. So, and just, I think he's for sure going to have the potential to get out there and get himself amongst the top ranked lightweights and work towards fighting for a belt, and going down that route, because it's shown in his performances so far within the UFC, from his debut to like where he's at now. But then the maturity and the self-awareness as an athlete to go, hey, there's the featherweight world champion is, a couple hours away from me. I'm going to go and train with him. I'm going to go and absorb the knowledge I can. I'm going to go and do work with him and bounce off him on the daily. A guy that I shared the cage with, and actually add it all together and see if that can implement some benefits to my game. Because a lot of people, man, they don't have, like you're talking about before, we're talking about male ego and stuff like that. They wouldn't have the ability to do that, man. I know, like I can tell you, a majority of the people would not want to take their ego, put it aside, and go train with someone that they shared the cage with that beat them. It just wouldn't be a thing. So the fact that someone's got the ability to do that, and shows you just how much dedication he has to the sport and wanting to improve and to continue on the journey, it all speaks to that. So I feel like he's got all the potential in the world. And man, I'm just going to keep putting it out there, man. At the end of the day, the work we do, people ain't doing the work we do. And it's just going to keep being shown every single time. You're going to keep seeing Volk defending his belt. You're going to keep seeing Jamie, Blake, Josh Kulabau, guys like that. You're going to keep seeing them coming in and doing these incredible things, because they're working with their own coaches and teams, but they're coming in, they're sharing the mats with all these other top athletes in the country. And it all matters. It all adds up. And that's what happens when you see these performances. That's why that's happening, because the work's being done. the maturity and the self-awareness is there to absorb the knowledge that you have at your disposal. But then also, at the end of the day, these guys are doing this sport because they want to be the best in the world and want to be world champions. They're not here to just do it for a bit and then, okay, make some money and then get out and focus on other things. Like, everyone that walks through those doors that's on those mats, you can kind of tell, like, the pros in that, like, they're all 100% invested into this. So, yeah, I think there's a potential for a bunch of Australian and New Zealand athletes to become champions within the sport across every level and potentially multiple different promotions. And Jamie's certainly one of them.
Definitely, and he's he's too cool for Fight News Australia now that he's knocking on the door of the top 15. He no longer returns my texts, so shout out to Jamie there if he's listening. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how he goes as he sort of pushes into the rankings there, because lightweight is one hell of a division. If you got let's say for example we've got Gregor Gillespie at 10 and Rafael Fiziev at 11, so that gives you an idea of what's awaiting someone who's aspiring to get into the rankings. So but it's hard to bet against him when you see a fighter of that age who's putting on fantastic performances and improving every time. Then it's hard to bet against someone like that.
Yeah, and I mean at the end of the day, like like you sort of touched on, man, he's only early into his tenure within the UFC. Like, that's something that people are forgetting as well. Like, he's early into his tenure in the UFC, but the guy's super experienced. Like, he's had a lot of fights. He's had a lot of high pressure situations already. He's had the experience in all these different sort of capacities. Like, I mean, when he fought Brad Riddell, that was in front of a capacity crowd and was an absolute crazy fight. So, he's had all those sort of crazy experiences within the UFC already within these fights. And within his career just in general. So, yeah, all that sort of stuff, it all sort of factors in. Like, but as for him winning this fight against Jalen, I'm pulling for him to get another sort of knockout, get another bonus. And then I think he definitely did say that it's his shot. It's going to be his shout for shots and beers and stuff like that when he gets back. So, and then when we're doing that, I'll be sure to pull him aside and be like, all right, man, you got to come on Fight Talk Down Under and give us a bit of a breakdown, some gossip, some extra content, help us boost things up a bit.
Absolutely, yeah. Get a few shots into him first. Yeah, it's funny what you'll agree to after a couple of those when you're riding off the back of a win and feeling generous. So sounds like a good plan. But in the main event on the weekend, which is obviously not Australian, but we'll touch on it as well because it's kind of a fun one. It's Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal.
Yep.
It's obviously been a fun build-up as promised, really, as advertised. Both guys are coming off 2 losses to Kamaru Usman, really, but it's just obviously the situation with them being ex-teammates. Both title contenders. All the backstory. Both outspoken sort of guys. It's been fun, but on paper, it's a really fun matchup as well. So, yeah, how do you see it?
Honestly, I hope it's just like a 5-round scrap, and it's like they're just a la sort of Robbie Lawler, Rory McDonald too. If we can get something like that going, I'm going to be stoked. That's sort of best case scenario. But my heart says I want to see Masvidal absolutely starch Colby Covington. But then at the same time, I'm like, I'm not an idiot, and I'm pretty well sort of invested into the sport. And I just think that Colby's just got too much to offer, too many weapons. His wrestling's obviously like a very big weapon that he can use to kind of shut Masvidal down with. But it's just going to depend on the night who can sort of keep their emotions at bay the best, because, this is a fight where there is a lot of emotion and a lot of sort of angst invested into it. And then, Masvidal's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders because his entire team, all his teammates, his coaches, like a big portion of the world and fans of the sport want to see him iron out Colby Covington and, put him completely away. But at the same time, Covington's got a lot of pressure on himself, because if all these things that are coming out in the lead up to this fight are correct, and you're saying that they're not, and you're trying to paint this picture that you have been hard done by, and this wasn't the case, and they're the problem, you weren't, blah 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 blah. You need to be able to come out here and win this fight and kind of just put it to bed and then move forward and trying to cement yourself to get another fight with Kamaru, which is, the only sort of path for someone like Colby after a fight like this. Beating Masvidal, he's a superstar within the sport. He's got a lot of hype behind him. It's just going to do well for your stock moving forward if you can, put him away. And you look at that second fight that Colby had with Kamaru, man, it was close as well. I've rewatched that fight 3 times now, and I'm inclined to think that Colby Covington won rounds 3, 4, and 5. And like every time I watch it, that kind of stands out a bit more because that first fight obviously was very close, but Kamaru was able to put him away. This fight, first 2 rounds were just all Kamaru, but yeah, like I said, rounds 3, 4, and 5, super close, but I'm inclined to give him to Colby. But then on the other side of things, you look at Masvidal, first fight, Kamaru just picked him apart, beat him up. Second fight, completely ironed him out, put him to sleep. They've shared that common experience with fighting Kamaru and kind of losing to him. And in fights like that, you always improve. You take some things away and you get better and you apply moving forward. So I feel like that's what's potentially going to lead us to having an incredible fight between these two guys, because there's more at stake than just a win that's going to cement you with a step forward towards another title shot. You're fighting for your pride, and this is where ego plays into it. We're talking about the male ego. This is for all the chips. The ego is the main thing involved here. You do not want to be the guy that gets, lets the other guy one up you and get a win over you, especially like one where you're getting finished and embarrassed in front of thousands, if not millions of people.
Absolutely, yeah. And on paper, it really can't be a bad fight, can it? Like, they're two guys with just apparently just infinite gas tanks. They fight at a furious pace. Like, it's going to be, like, on paper anyway. And often these fights end up being terrible, the ones that look brilliant on paper. But really, it should be just a spectacle to see these guys just coming at each other for however long it lasts.
I feel like it's going to be... Yeah, the tell's going to be within the first 2 minutes of the fight. It's going to be, if I was to sort of give anyone advice when they get ready to sort of watch this fight, is pay attention in the first 2 minutes and pay attention to how Colby Covington responds to Masvidal and what he sort of does with the hands down, talking to him, throwing some short, sharp, fast shots towards him, jabbering away at them. That's gonna be a big tell. If we see Covington kind of come out the same way he did in the first fight with Kamaru, it could be a very short night for him. It could be a very short night for him because that can, Masvidal, we've seen it. He can pull people away. He put Darren Till away. He obviously starched someone like, he starched Ben Askren. I understand Ben's not known for having, this sort of incredible striking ability, and it was a flying knee off the start. But man, the guy can pull people away. He can hurt him. He can end the night. So the first 2 minutes is going to be crucial in this fight. But then after that, we're gonna sort of be able to. You're going to be able to look at the fight and go, oh, okay, we can see how this is going to play out, and that's going to come down to that sort of how does Colby respond to having Masvidal in front of him, talking at him, trying to get in his head, trying to play on the fact that he's emotional, and then whether or not he mixes in the wrestling. If he mixes in the wrestling, he's able to take Masvidal down, and we don't see Masvidal able to sort of improve his position and get back up, it's going to be pretty easy to sit there and go, okay, well, this fight's going to go to Colby.
Yeah, that was going to be the one I was going to bring up there. I think the wrestling is the big equaliser. If Colby does go to it, that first takedown attempt, I think he's going to tell us a lot about how the fight's going to play out. So, that's going to be an interesting watch as well. But I think Colby, he sort of started a bit slowly in the last time out against Usman, and like you said there, if he does that against Masvidal, there's a good chance he could get put away early. So I think he's they're going to have to meet in the middle and really just to see what's what.
It's almost like I kind of wish that the UFC would have turned around and looked like, yo, we'll give you guys $1 million each and a bonus if you just stand in the middle and fight. Like, no takedowns. Let's just fight. I think all the fans would appreciate that. I think those two gentlemen would appreciate that. But look, at the end of the day, all this bravado and all this sort of character that's being played by Covington and Masvidal in his own right, and all this sort of stuff like that. At the end of the day, that doesn't matter. These guys want to be known as one of the best fighters on the planet. They want to be champions within the sport. They want to, kind of cement their own legacies. So at the end of the day, I think you're going to see both guys are just going to revert to what they know and revert to the things that they know can win them fights. And for Covington, I feel like, he's going to definitely work in the wrestling. And once he does that, it's a wrap. Like the chances of the fight going the opposite way when you are going to pursue that kind of style of fighting is just going to be hard to deal with. People will complain. And like Masvidal's been one of those people. Like people will complain about the wrestling side of things and guys who are able to control people and grind out these fights where they're kind of just putting a pace on people and beating on them and grinding them out. But at the end of the day, it works, and that's what wins world titles. You're here to fight, you're here to win. I understand people want to be exciting, and like I've said many times before, finishes are cool, being these exciting fights are cool, but at the end of the day, you're trying to win. You're trying to get money for yourself and those people that you're kind of looking after and providing for, and your family and all that sort of stuff. And if you're like someone like Colby, you're there trying to win a world title. You're there trying to cement yourself as the best welterweight on planet Earth. So I think he's gonna go back to doing what he does best, and that's kind of mixing in his game as a whole, using his gas tank, lots of volume, lots of wrestling, and then just grind Masvidal out.
At the end of the day, it's a high stakes fight, and they have to win. Like it's one thing to put on a fan friendly fight, but at the end of the day, you've got to come out with a win, because both guys have had their colours lowered twice now against Kamaru Usman, and whoever loses this fight kind of falls back into the pack a little bit. So really, Covington and Masvidal, they've got to do whatever they have to win the fight at the end of the day. But does it feel like maybe a title shot is on the line here, or because on paper it kind of seems like a little bit of a similar situation to Robert Whittaker, where they've kind of lost now twice to the champion, and they might need to possibly string some wins together to sort of sell their cases for a third fight against Usman. Or do you think maybe, given the magnitude of this fight and this rivalry, do you think the winner would be catapulted into another shot against Usman?
I think if Covington wins, it's going to be entirely possible that he kind of gets himself put forward for a title shot again. Based on the fact that, both fights with Usman were incredibly close. And Usman himself has said, if he wasn't in that division, didn't exist, Colby Covington's the world champion. So I feel like if Colby comes out there, absolutely just dominates Masvidal, or even just comes out and just finishes him quite effortlessly, he's going to be back in the conversation for a title shot at Kamaru. With Masvidal, if he wins, star power wise, it just shoots through the roof even more, and he's going to gain like a shit ton more fans and popularity, which is to be expected. As for a title shot, I feel like we need to see him fight, maybe get another win or two after this fight, and then we can sort of look at that Kamaru fight, because I think right now it's going to be hard to kind of sell that, unless he comes out there against Covington and is able to shut down the wrestling, he's able to shut down all that sort of stuff, and he shows that he's improved significantly, and that, because if he's able to stop if he's able to stop Covington's takedowns and, keep the fight where he wants it and able to put him away, man, then you can make that argument that he should be fighting Kamaru again for a belt, because Covington took Usman down. He's a really good wrestler. If Masvidal can stop someone like Covington's game, he can for sure do that with someone like Usman. Because the spread is quite thin between the two guys, and they've got similar styles, similar kind of credentials in the wrestling kind of side of things as well. So it's going to be interesting. But if we just see Masvidal get taken down, unable to improve positions, unable to sort of answer the problems that are presented by Colby doing those sort of things, then it's going to be hard for me to sort of want to watch a third fight between him and Usman, and especially based on how the second fight ended, because he starched him. He put him away completely. He knocked him clean out. The first fight, he dominated him. He wrestled him. He beat him up the whole time. So it's kind of like he's beaten you both ways. He did his approach, the wrestling, grappling, grindy approach and just kind of wailed on you for 5 rounds and beat you up. And then he did it your way. He stood with you and he knocked you clean out. So it's kind of like, yeah, unless you showcase something new or you're able to present a new sort of problem and do that against someone like Covington, I can't see him getting another fight with Usman unless he racks up a few wins.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hard sell at the end of the day. Like you said, it was a couple of resounding victories for Usman against Masvidal there. So yeah, he's probably got a bit more work to do. But yeah, on this weekend just gone, we'll touch on that before we wrap up. Islam Makhachev, again, no Australians represented in the UFC on the weekend, but Islam Makhachev took on Bobby Green, who was a last minute sort of replacement for Beneil Dariush, and I guess the fight sort of went as expected. Really, Makhachev took him down pretty easily and ended up finishing him early in round 1 with ground and pound. But Makhachev's now up to 10 wins in a row, 4 finishes in his last 4 fights. He's ranked number 4 going into the fight, so he's kind of. There's been talk of him sort of getting a title shot now off the back of this win. But does it feel to you like he sort of needs to fight Beneil Dariush, who's ranked number 3 first before he gets a title shot? Or do you think 10 wins on the bounce is enough to get him in there?
I think he needs to get the winner of Justin and Oliveira, man. Honestly, like, obviously Beneil's an absolute savage, but I feel like whether it was Beneil in there today, Bobby Green, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, I don't think it matters. I think he would have done the exact same thing. He would have been able to dominate completely. He would have more than likely secured a first round finish. And the only person in this division at the moment that there's 2 people that kind of stick out as potentially sort of rough matchups for him. That's Oliveira, based on his grappling pedigree and how we've seen him go strength from strength. And he's a champion, and you got to give him the respect he deserves. The guy's shown that he's improved every single time. He's on an 11 fight win streak. He's finishing people. He's shown that he can deal with the adversity and come back and put away these top lightweights. So it's like Oliveira's a rough matchup for someone like Islam. And then another matchup that I think is a pretty rough one for him is actually Tony Ferguson, because he's another guy that's kind of like really unorthodox. He's very dangerous he's got a really good attack and guard. He's throwing elbows the whole time. He's slicing you up. He's throwing up submissions. And I think a lot of people have counted Tony Ferguson out based on his last couple of performances. They're kind of like, oh, he's done. He's over the hill, blah, blah, blah. But I just think that someone like Tony Ferguson is a horrible matchup at the end of the day for someone like Islam, because Islam's more than happy to entertain the striking at some point to a certain degree, whereas with he gets the comparisons to Khabib. Khabib didn't really entertain the striking too much with anyone. He would like a tiny bit, and then he would go to what he knows. He kind of, in the Gaethje fight, that was the only fight where you kind of really saw Khabib take control on the feet as well, and he was able to just beat up Justin. But I feel like there's a bunch of different factors involved. He was fighting. His dad just died. He wanted to get the win. He knew he was going to walk away. So I kind of think he was just kind of like, nothing's going to stop me. Nothing's going to faze me. I'm going to go out there and do what I need to do. Whereas Islam, you've seen him. He's more than happy to trade with people on the feet. And there's been a few times where, he's taken a few shots here and there, and he's had to deal with some sort of problems coming his way. And at the end of the day, you've got to give someone who's got a grappling ability like an Oliveira or a Ferguson, you've got to give them credit and kind of the respect as well, because they can throw submissions up from all these weird angles. They can hurt you with elbows and stuff from the bottom there. Those are all things that factor in. It's easy to hold someone down and beat on them and wail on them when they're not really actively trying to throw anything back. They're not really able to try and damage you, or they're not trying to submit you, or they're just kind of like,
they're just trying to survive down there.
Yeah, they're just stuck. And then as opposed to you see someone like Ferguson or Oliveira, as soon as if they get put in a position like that, they're throwing up submissions, they're throwing up elbows, they're trying to finish you. They're trying to finish you the whole time. So it's like those 2 matchups are probably the ones that I look at for Islam moving forward, where I'm kind of like, yeah, that'll be cool to see how that plays out, and that's sort of dangerous matchups for him. But as opposed to this fight now with Bobby Green, obviously it was a last-minute replacement, but Islam was able to do what he did. Had it been Beneil in there, I feel like he would have done the same thing. You got to give the guy a title shot. He's on a 10-fight win streak. You give him the winner of Gaethje versus Oliveira, and after that, you're going to be. I feel like we're going to be in his world if he can pass the test that's in front of him, which I think more than likely will end up being Charles Oliveira. Like, I feel like it's going to be. We're going to get set up to see a good couple fights between Islam and Oliveira moving forward, and then we're going to see some of these other guys come back into the mix as well.
How do you reckon he fares then? Is this a future world champion we're looking at in Islam Makhachev?
I feel like if Islam Makhachev is able to win the world title, he will be champion long enough that names like St. Pierre, names like Anderson Silva, they kind of fall out of that GOAT conversation. I feel like he's got potential to rack up a record number of title defenses in a division that, like we spoke about, is absolutely stacked with talent. And so, you're covering all the bases. He's a young guy. He's got time to rack up a bunch of defenses, set some records, beat the best people in the world, and such a high caliber of athlete that we don't have those things popping in the conversation where you do with Khabib, where it's like, okay, there's only like 4 or 5 wins that he has that are like, you can kind of go, okay, those are like notable wins. And then you look at someone like Anderson, who's like the record for title defenses. Someone like St. Pierre won 2 belts, was able to sort of do all those sort of things. But if Islam's able to become champion, defend the belt for a record number of times, and keep beating these guys that are sort of in the lightweight division at the moment, man, we might be talking about one of the greatest mixed martial artists to ever do it.
There you go. That's huge raps. But a guy who's won 10 fights in a row, as you said, on in the lightweight division, which is incredibly stacked. Probably tells you all you need to know. There's no gimme fights in the lightweight division in the UFC. That's for sure. But one other guy who probably stood out on the card, you singled him out when we were chatting earlier today. Is Arman Tsarukyan. He's 18-2. He's 5-1 in the UFC. He obviously had a big TKO win over Joel Alvarez. It was obviously one of the nastiest cuts we've seen in a while, from the elbow from the top. But and Alvarez himself, just to put a bit of perspective on it, he's no mug himself. He's 19-2, 4-1 in the UFC. Out of his 19 wins, he's got 16 submissions and 3 KOs. So for Tsarukyan to sort of take him down and control him on the ground and beat him up with ground and pound was pretty impressive in the end. So what do you make of him? What's the potential in Arman Tsarukyan?
Yeah, he's obviously gone strength to strength, and gotten a couple of back-to-back finishes. And obviously, yeah, like we sort of touched on there, Alvarez is like very dangerous. His submissions are very, very dangerous. He's a long guy. He's 6'3", got really long limbs. Like he's a hard problem to solve. He's similar to Jalen Turner in that sense, where he's like really big and long and lanky for the division, and it's kind of like going to be hard to deal with for a lot of people. But Tsarukyan came in. He's in shape. He looked like he was in the best shape we've seen him in yet in his sort of tenure in the UFC. Came in there, took him down, was able to control him, shut down everything that he was offering. And then, like you sort of said, he cut him with some really hard elbows and just wailed on him and beat on him. And then obviously in the next round came out, went back to what was working, and then was just sort of able to do it again. And we didn't really see Alvarez kind of recover after that big cut and after taking all that damage. The guy stayed in it as long as he could. Credit to that guy, man. He didn't look like he was going to give up or quit. And I'm thankful that the ref did kind of stop it when he did, because with a cut that's that bad and the damage that he was taking, it's like, man, the guy doesn't need to. Like, he's young. He's like you sort of said, he's also early into his UFC career. We kind of want to see the guy come back and go strength to strength. So I was happy to see that. But Tsarukyan, obviously, man, he shared the cage with Islam, and obviously Islam was able to get the win over him. But that fight was competitive. There was a lot of competitive exchanges in that fight. So potentially Tsarukyan could be a guy that we could see build himself back up now, continue with this momentum moving forward, continue racking up these finishes, continue improving. And, that could be a guy eventually that we see develop into a problem for someone like Islam, for someone like Oliveira, for someone like Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler. It could be a guy that'd be in that mix right there, you know. So yeah, I was very impressed by his performance today because obviously, like we spoke about, Alvarez isn't a slouch. The guy finishes everyone, and you know, for someone like Sarukian to take him down and beat him up on the ground, where this guy's got potential to kind of end the fight at any moment, was sort of incredible. And so he said something afterwards I found was interesting. He was talking to the commentators, and it was just enough that you could kind of catch what he said. And he said to Felder, and that he said, "I'd like a fight where I'm fighting 5 rounds so I can show, you know, what I'm really capable of." We saw what he was able to do within less than, you know, 2 rounds, the damage and pace he was able to put on. A 5-round fight against another sort of top level opponent, I'd be interested to see that, and I'd be interested to see him and Islam have a rematch down the line. 5 rounds, get after it, and kind of see how that plays out. So yeah, he kind of stuck out for me a bit today. Obviously, Islam had a great performance. There's a couple of good fights on the card, but he kind of he stuck out a bit for me with his sort of performance.
Absolutely. He's only 25 years old as well, which is kind of a scary prospect. You got a guy like that with sort of the wrestling and the sort of, I guess, the physical strength that he has at only 25. You know, he's still developing, already ranked number 13. A guy like that is just, it's going to be a problem for anyone, really, a guy who can wrestle the way he does. So he's going to be an interesting watch for sure. But before we wrap up, on the local scene, I was in the building last night at Demolition MMA here in Melbourne. It was just, it's only their 5th show. They're an up-and-coming promotion here in Melbourne. And shout out to Wayne, the promoter. His hospitality was fantastic. It was a really great night and a great night of fights. It was really well matched. But did you watch the show at all? Did you see?
Yeah. Some really good fights. Obviously,
the standout for me was probably a young Harry Webb. Did you see him? He's amateur. He's out of I want to say Infinite MMA. I hope I didn't get that wrong, but he looked the goods. He was probably the one that stood out for me on the night. And we know we don't go into the amateurs too much, but I think he's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, really good composure too. He looked kind of, it didn't seem like you were watching that fight. You didn't kind of get the vibe that he was an amateur fighter, just kind of like, getting in there and having these sort of early experiences in the sport. He seemed quite composed, and like he kind of, in a sense, seemed like a guy who's one of these seasoned pros, like one of these guys that kind of he was just going through the motions. He was just doing his thing. He was being patient and was just able to kind of do what was obviously put forward to him by his team and his coaches, and to kind of execute that without any sort of hiccups, really. Like, I was quite impressed, and the fights were all very well matched. Like, I quite like watching, like, especially these shows with these amateurs, with these sort of amateur fighters, and they're getting stuck in. And I've sort of spoken about that over the last few years, the level with even just the amateurs is just gone through the roof as well. Like, you're seeing some of these amateurs come out and they're looking like they're pros with like 20 fights. Like, the way they're sort of carrying themselves and the performances they're putting on and the talent that they have, you're just like, man, it's amazing. So yeah, like you sort of said, Wayne and his team are doing a great job, and I imagine it's going to sort of continue moving forward when they keep putting these shows together.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned there was no bad fights on the card. There was no mismatches. It was all very well matched. So that was really impressive. That was probably just something that I wanted to quickly touch on there. But young Harry Webb, he looks like you said, he looks like a composed sort of kid, and he had a bit of swagger. I think he's definitely one to watch, and well-rounded skills too. So keep an eye out on that one. But I think we're out of time. We'll leave it there. But remember, everyone, please remember to like and subscribe if you're enjoying our content. You can obviously catch us on YouTube, Spotify, Fight News Australia, Google Podcasts, and on Podbean as well. Wherever you get your podcasts, chuck us a like, subscribe. Just keep an eye out for us. And everyone, thanks once again for listening. And Lockjaw, thanks again for stopping by.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I think it's reinvigorating my constant passion and love for the sport outside of when I'm fighting myself, or I'm training, or I'm in these camps and doing stuff like that. Talking about fights, it just kind of keeps reminding me every time, like, why I love this sport so much and why I'm so invested into it. So yeah, I'm always going to be be hyped every time we record an episode, and then, you know, hearing people's feedback and just kind of seeing how everything plays out. Like, obviously, when we're talking about these fights, breaking them down, whether it's on the local scene to, you know, the top level of the sport, and then kind of seeing how things pan out and the little, I guess, situations that come as a result of that.
I gotta watch it, you never know what might stop you. Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure.